Okay, we're just gonna make a start at this time. I want to be mindful of everyone's schedules. If we have more students joining later on during the session, so then we'll just bring them up to speed where we're at. So first of all, and first and foremost, thank you for joining me today on Friday for our second optional live online session. I am right now starting to share my screen, so I have a little bit of a presentation first about general things and then about this week's chapter material. This session and this recording follows exactly the format of our previous meeting, which is not one of the regular ones that I normally have on the calendar. I offered one yesterday on Thursday because I wanted to make sure that we ensure that since we're still finding the common time that works for everyone, that at least we do have meetings on our calendar and we're able to have this week as well. So if you watch that or if you join for that, there is no need to watch this one. It is the exact same content. So what I normally like to do with my students, whether it is in person or whether it is in an online setting, is to start the semester by going through a little bit of an introduction to the course. I think it's super useful in sense that it sets us a scene of what are kind of the expectations both ways, what are some of the most common things that my students have questions on, and so on. Today, like I said, I'm going to spend the first half of the time on that, and then the second half looking at the chapter content. These reviews of the chapter content, they only cover partially of all of the material that I want to cover, so it's kind of a like nutshell version of the materials. The full lectures, full other material you will be able to find from the Canvas at the learning module. I have full-length videos there where I go into a little bit more detail than what I'm highlighting as the key points on these live online sessions. What's important for me during these meetings is to create a space and a time for us to also connect. So if we have more attendance, it is going to be more interactive. If there's less attendance, and that's okay as well, I realize that this is an asynchronous course and many of you have many other commitments. Whenever it is just me or just few students, it's probably going to be more of led by me. When we have greater attendance, it's going to be led more by what your interests are. Normally, we would spend a little bit of time looking at the goals of the participants in terms of the career. That helps me to pull examples that are most relevant for what you're pursuing. But in this interest of time and with the lower attendance today, I'm just gonna skip that for time being. I wanted to introduce myself. We've already met a few times in a virtual space, but my name is Sam Rauhalami and I will be your instructor on this course. I have mentioned it on the syllabus, but I want to share it here as well. I am here with the intention that I don't want you to feel that this is a course where you work by yourself and it's all on you. I'm very much a partner to work with. It is something that I hold very important to my way of teaching, is that I'm here to support you even if it's an online course. That doesn't mean that we wouldn't have regular interaction and you would have regular access to me. The best way to get hold of me if we don't meet in these virtual spaces, and with these virtual spaces, I mean our live online meetings and also our discussion boards, and I'll show examples of those in a bit. If you do not have a chance to join one of those, the other thing that I can recommend is that you contact me from Canvas messaging system. Canvas messaging system is my preferred method, and mainly because I do get quite a bit influx of email. It is possible that your email gets buried somewhere along the way. If you message me on Canvas, I typically am able to answer much quicker to those messages. I try to normally honor about 24-hour turnaround time. I know this first week we've had quite a few things happening, including AC issues and so on. So in the classrooms, so I haven't quite been always for every single message been able to uphold that. But if that's something that you notice that you've sent a message to me and you haven't heard back from me, please, please, please feel free to resend the same message. I'm more than happy to have it bumped on the top of the queue, and that way we'll make sure that you get response. During weekends, outside the working week, I typically might take a little longer than 24 hours to answer. I do, however, monitor again Canvas messages very closely when we have big assignments like exams, practicals due. Even if it's due at the end of the week on Sunday night, I try to on Sunday check in regularly that there's no technical issues that I'm hearing from the students. I offer also office hours. So all of my office hours, even though my office is located at the Williams campus, are also available for you through a virtual meeting. So just logging into my WebEx room is probably the best way to do that. Also, I do offer, if you prefer, an option to schedule a meeting outside my regular office hours. Fridays I typically do by appointment for the office hours. I have quite a few other duties as well that I attend on Fridays, but if you let me know, I'll make sure that we find the time, even if it falls outside what I have listed as the office hours. I spoke a little bit about my background on the last meeting and last recording, so I'm going to keep this more of as a nutshell version today, especially since I have another meeting that I have to jump out of here at the end of our regular meeting time. My background is in medical imaging. I'm particularly interested in MR imaging, and in the field of MR imaging, I'm interested in cardiac imaging. The reason why I have an interest for this field is that with cardiac imaging, one of the things that we end up noticing is that to acquire the quality of MRI scans that I'm looking for, it takes about 2 to 3 seconds. However, you're never going to have a living patient with a heart that's still for 2 to 3 seconds. So that presents us some interesting challenges for imaging, and that's something that I'm very passionate and very interested about as I work on that field. Looking at the pictures that you see on the screen, and obviously this is not part of your exam material, this is more of just as a discussion. What we see at the right bottom corner is a typical MRI scan that you would see, and it's actually a composition, superimposed a couple of images with contrast agent in between. And on these images, if there's a tissue necrosis, that myocardial tissue, it shows up as a bright signal on the myocardial wall. So here you will see heart, you will see the left ventricle, some papillary muscles, and a right ventricle. You would have liver underneath, lungs around, chest here. So this bright signal tells us that there's been probably a blockage in one of the coronary arteries, so we haven't been supplying sufficient oxygen and nutrients to this structure, and that has caused damage to the cardiac tissue, and the tissue is gone. There's nothing we can really do to bring it back. However, what the imaging team that I've been working with, what we're interested is that can we predict, is this all that there is going to be a damage, or is this damage going to potentially get bigger if we don't treat the patient? And that's what we can do with these novel imaging methods. So they provide us a bright signal, an area at risk, which we can predict that will potentially die if we do not do an intervention. So it's a good way of balancing those risks and benefits of treatments, and then choosing based on that what's the best course of action for the treatment. My real background before that was in conservation restoration, so I'm especially interested in preserving historical objects, and it took me to work a lot with organic materials and a lot at the excavation sites. And while working at the excavation sites, one of the things that stood out to me was that I was actually working with a lot of objects that were burial objects, objects that were buried with bodies. And as I was doing that, I realized that I probably should know something about human anatomy. And I went back to school and did my undergrad and postgrad on pure human anatomy. And that led me to the path to the medical field. What we see with the catheters is that a lot of the time, especially if it's a mummified body, for example, it is hard to see what's in. Let's say if we had an Egyptian mummy and you would want to unwrap to see what's inside, obviously you can't just wrap that body back again. It's not going to be the same object. So that's where medical imaging steps in, and I became very interested on that. And again, went back to school and focused on medical imaging. I have done also working with living patients, so it's not only the people who have passed away. I also do have some background in forensic work through this field. Obviously, when we are working with archaeological specimens, there's no forensic role really on that because they are so old that the crime is no longer relevant to that. But sometimes it is hard to distinguish that. Is it a recent crime? Are those remains something that we need to investigate in terms of forensic setting, or is it more of a historical finding? So I have some background on that, and I think that we can have some interesting discussions about that if you're interested on that. I have done a lot of basic research as well, especially on the field of embryology. So the early development of human life is what I'm very interested from the conception to day 14, post-conception. Also medical imaging, like I mentioned. So a lot of work with the sonographers, especially, and teaching sonography. And teaching future nurses, radio techs, so on, so on. When I was doing that work, I ended up kind of in a roundabout way, just visiting in community college sphere here in the US. And what I realized, I think community colleges really serve a really important role for the society in sense of making education accessible for everyone, regardless of your financial or otherwise background. We want to make sure that everyone has a chance to pursue a career that's a good fit for them. And that's where I think that community colleges offer these opportunities in a very affordable manner. So I'm very excited to work at the community colleges, and I'm choosing to be in this field. So here's what I'm asking from you this week. This week, at the end of today, end of the Friday, I do hope that you will have completed the syllabus quiz, and I will also have our first chapter assignments due for us at the end of the week on Sunday, 1 minute before midnight. So you will have for most chapters a chapter quiz and a chapter practice anatomy activity, and that is very much the case this week as well. So please make sure that you get those submitted. You will be completing the syllabus quiz at Canvas course, and the chapter quiz and chapter practice anatomy you will access through Canvas course, our publisher's platform, and connect, and there you will be able to complete these assignments, and the grades will automatically transfer over to our Canvas course. Like I mentioned, each week you typically have a quiz and practice anatomy. On some weeks you will also have more of a short answer essay type of an activity. I label those as food for thought, so they're usually much more application-based questions. I do also have some lab simulations for us to work through, so I try to mix it up a little bit, but that's a pretty predictable pattern of what you can anticipate on this course. I do also have 3 exams for us and 3 practicals for us. I've already received some questions from eager students who want to know in greater detail what to expect with those. At this point, I really do want you to focus on getting those homework assignments from this chapter in first, and we will talk in more detail about exams and practicals once we are a little bit closer to those. But I'm happy to answer to individual questions as well, but I really would encourage you get started with the homework. Don't worry about the exam and practical just yet. If you're curious about those, you have a lot of information on the syllabus about those, and I will never send you to a test without making sure that you're prepared and understanding what to expect with the test. So that's my commitment to you. Like I mentioned, we search for a suitable time for us to meet. If I've now picked 2 times per week. I realize that these times and dates might not have been your ideal times and dates. Unfortunately, I do have also a heavy teaching load, so I can't be spending every moment that it would work for you. I'm not available for that. So the times that mutually seem to be most suitable are on Wednesdays from 2 to 3 in the afternoon, and on Friday mornings from 10 to 11. I am open to mixing these around as we get started, but let's start with these times. Also, the other thing that I think is worthwhile to mention is that there's going to be some days, especially Fridays, when I do have other commitments, unfortunately, that are already on my calendar from the college's side. And for that reason, we might need to adjust the time that we meet on those Friday days or find a different day for those particular weeks. And I posted a list of all of those dates that I know at the moment on our announcement. I will record these meetings, so recording will be made available. Sometimes I only record one if it's the same, or I might record both, but I might only share one recording if it's the same content. I don't want you to have to watch through the same material multiple times. But if you're not able to come and join me, like I said, these are optional. That's an additional element that I offer to you. I will certainly make them available also in as a recording for you. Here's really all of the material that we will be covering this semester together. This week we start with some basic introduction, terminology, looking at overview of systems, talking about body regions and movements. Then the next few chapters that we'll look at, I believe, are going to be largely revision of the materials that you've already covered in your prerequisite classes. So we'll have a look of tissues, we'll have a look of chemical basis of life, we'll talk about cells and genetics. So I don't anticipate that I'm going to test you super detailed about this revision kind of content, but I do think it's useful that we go through them to make sure that everyone's at the same place for this course. Following that, we will start going through system by system, what we have covered for this semester together. So we'll start with integumentary system, which will cover your skin and associated structures like nails, hair, glands, so all that good stuff. Following that, we'll start looking at the bone, cartilages. We'll take our first exam and first practical, followed by looking at different bones of the skeleton. We'll also talk a little bit about joints before moving to discuss muscles. We'll talk about muscle tissue in general and then focus on large skeletal muscles that are the ones that we often study on the body that are responsible for generating movements. We'll again take an exam and practical on this content before finishing the semester together by talking about nervous system. Here our interest will be on the various levels of nervous system, from central nervous system, peripheral nervous system, autonomic nervous system, all the way to talking about sense organs, and we'll finish our semester by taking the last exam and last practical. Each of these exams covers only the chapters right in front of it, so I do not have a cumulative final exam, but rather will cover the material in chunks. Like I mentioned, I will provide further details about exams once we get closer to there. One of the most important things that I do want to highlight today is that Syllabus is going to be a great resource for you. You'll find it on our Canvas course. I have heard rumblings that, well, for most students, accessing Syllabus through this button here will work. There are few students who have faced challenges with opening it. For that reason, I have actually uploaded a PDF file of the syllabus also to your Start Here assignment or Start Here module. Like I mentioned, you will be completing most of the work on this course through Canvas. In addition, our textbook publishers Connect Learning platform is where the quizzes and practicals typically are. So you will be spending time there. These two are linked. So any work that you complete at the Connect will automatically transfer the points to the Canvas. I already mentioned that preferred method of contacting me is going to be through Canvas messaging. Textbook for this course is automatically included in an electronic format on your tuition for this class. So when you go to the Connect, you have an access also to an electronic version of our textbook there. Many people find that useful because, for example, you can listen to textbook as an audio. So those of you who are driving a lot, that might be an interesting option rather than reading to listen to textbook. We'll talk about grading in a little bit for this course, but again, on the syllabus, it is fully laid out what assignments carry how many points and how many points do you need for each of the final grades. The next topic that I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about is various disabilities. So not all disabilities are always visible from the outside. We might have invisible disabilities, we might have learning challenges, we might have extreme anxiety, or for example, mental health challenges. So remember that disabilities are a broad spectrum of things. If you do have a documented disability, if you have had an accommodation plan in high school, for example, we do offer accommodations on our classes. Those are processed through our disability resource services. So the best thing you can do is to get hold of them as soon as possible to make sure that we have time to process everything, and they will work with you reviewing the documentation, finding what are reasonable accommodations to ensure that you're going to be successful in this class, so you don't have to worry about compensating for the disability, but you can fully focus on just the learning activity. The outcome of this consultation is going to be an accommodation plan, and that's all that will ever be shared with me. I will not know about your disability. It's not something that I will talk about in public. I simply will be informed what are your accommodations on this class once I find the accommodation plan forwarded to me. If you do have an accommodation plan, I typically contact you. The first week of classes is a little hectic, but I will contact you really soon and let you know that I've received it and that I've implemented whatever changes they were that we were told to do based on that plan. So that's something to keep in mind. I encourage you to pursue this avenue, even if you feel that you're fine. If you have a disability and you do not need help, it's nice to have that plan at least at your back pocket. You do not need to utilize it, but we can't do retrospective disability accommodation plans. So it's only from the moment when the plan comes in place that we can do these changes for your coursework. My promise to my students is always to match their effort, match their commitment. So I do genuinely want to see every student in my class to succeed. I'm not an instructor that would want to trick my students or catch them out. So I'm very, very transparent and very clear of how I approach teaching and what my expectations are. And I appreciate when students are communicative. That helps me to make sure that I know how I can best help you. I also want to be respectful for your time. You've noticed that I've stripped off any fluff from this course. If I ask you to do something, there is a learning intent behind that. So we don't just have feel-good activities. They are leading towards the learning, all of those. Since it is an online class, we're working really hard to ensure that we're still offering that constant interaction between myself and you, but also between you and your peers. So I really encourage you to capitalize on using these live online sessions and our discussion forums as a tool to accomplish that. I do genuinely want to get to know all of my students. I value your insights. If you have things that I can do to help you to learn better, I'm here for that. That's my job, to facilitate your learning. It helps me a great deal when I know my students better. I know what their goals are. I can adjust the examples that I pick based on that and so on. So again, let's work together. Let's make sure that we make this the best possible learning experience that you can have. So that brings me to the end of this presentation that I had planned here. I'm going to jump out of here with the hopes of being able to stop sharing my screen. And instead, what we're going to be doing next, we are going to look to our Canvas course. And you should be again seeing my screen. So when you go to the Canvas course, you will find the concourse syllabus there, and your view looks a little different from mine, but once you click to the concourse syllabus, it will show our syllabus. It is a fairly extensive document, and like I said, I provided it also on a PDF file format on learning modules for anyone who is unable to open it through the concourse. Some of the most interesting things for my students are the major assignments, major activities. This gives you a little bit of an idea what you will expect, what you can expect, and also how much points are associated with each of the assignments and how they all add up together. On this course, I do not use a curve. So as long as you get below that 90%, you've got an A. If your final grade falls between 80 to 89%, that's going to be a B. 70 to 79% of all of the points gives you a C, and anything below that, then the subsequent grades. So this is kind of where I'm seeing what I'm envisioning how the points will distribute. Obviously, I do reserve a right to make changes as I see appropriate for the class needs as we go through the semester. Another thing that many students find useful from the syllabus is the course calendar. Here I do list each week is represented by one module. I list what are the assignments associated with that week and when are the due dates for those assignments. So many students find this as an useful resource as well. There's a bunch of other stuff available for you. Like I said, if you have a question, syllabus is always a good place to start, but I also am here to help you. Like I said, the syllabus is a living document, so there is a chance that changes are needed, and if they are needed, I will communicate those as they become relevant. So I'm going to jump out of the syllabus, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to the same view that you would see as a student of the Canvas course. So when you go to the modules, you will see that we had our Start Here module. This is where I uploaded the syllabus as well in a PDF format for anyone who had a hard time accessing it through the concourse. Notice this is where you find the syllabus quiz, and like I said, completing that is going to be important so that you do not get dropped from the class. The reason why we drop students who are not attending to the class is that we do not want you to accrue student debt, and if you're not participating, it's better for you to be eliminated from the class so you do not end up with a debt. If you were to miss the due date for syllabus quiz and were dropped from the class, you can always contact me and I will work with you individually. I also have our first discussion forum here at the Start Here module. That was where we were looking for the best time for these optional meetings. So like I said, we ended up landing on Wednesdays from 2 to 3 and Fridays from 10 to 11. We will meet at my WebEx room. We're there at the moment. So again, this is optional thing. I want to offer this, but it's not a required. This is an asynchronous course, and I will also record these and make recordings available for you. So that was our first Start Here module. This week, we will also work on week 1 assignments or week 1 module, which covers our first chapter. Many students find it useful to have the learning outcomes defined for each chapter, so that's available for you there as well. As the very first part of that learning module, you'll find lecture videos that are more like what I would do if we were in a in-person classroom when I tell to the students about the content. So you have those available for you there. I sometimes have also quicker videos, more of like shorts, where I prepare a diagram or a list. It shows how I ended up doing it, but most importantly, you have access to that final product. Sometimes we do pop in also to my classroom, and I have a recording of our time at the classroom when we're looking at contents. For example, this week we'll talk about movements of the body there. I have provided for you the lecture PowerPoint. So the lecture PowerPoint covers it's the publisher's PowerPoint. It covers all the same stuff that what I talk about. It looks a little different from these recorded videos, but same content there. And this is where I'll be also uploading the recordings from these live online sessions, so you can keep an eye of that. Like I mentioned, it's important for us to provide chances for interaction amongst ourselves and between each other. So this is where you find also a discussion forum for each chapter. So I've started our discussion here. I've asked some questions, trying to get you to think. Again, this is not a graded element of your course, but something that many students find useful and fun. So that's something, if you do want to clarify, you have questions, or you want to have a go, do you know what you should know at this stage? Always keep an eye of that forum, and let's see where we get. I visit this space very frequently, so I try to be active collaborator. I also encourage you to help each other on this space. So that's another resource for you. At each learning module, you'll also find the weekly homework. So for this week, at the end of the day on Sunday, you will have a quiz and practice anatomy to complete. And these are the points that add up towards your final grade. Finally, I do have all the same handouts that I would share in my in-person class available for you. So those might be nice resources for you to use. Sometimes I get students who have worked already in a medical field or related healthcare fields for a long time. So what we cover on this class is sometimes a little bit of less than exciting for them because they're so familiar with the content. So if you feel that the quizzes and practice anatomies, which are the required weekly homeworks, are not giving you enough of a challenge, I have more application and clinical oriented questions and learning material under the optional study area under the heading Want More. These are not required coursework. They are there just for those learners who want to go above and beyond. So you'll find there additional things to read, learn about, but you'll also find questions to make you think, clinical and critical thinking questions, and you can complete as much or as little of those as you wish and submit your answers then through this space underneath. You can submit your answer as if you take notes manually or on paper, a picture that you can upload of that, or a Word document file that you upload, or even you can type in there or copy paste your text there. Only thing that I warn you or ask you about, if you do submit a file, it has to be a file that's compatible with Windows environment. So I have to be able to open it on our learning management system. Unfortunately, Apple files will not open, so you do need to submit it in a format that works for that. So once you complete the assignment, like I said, you just submit it. I will gladly grade and provide individualized feedback for those. Sometimes students ask, how much do I need to do out of this? Like I said, you don't need to do any. This is additional stuff. I can often give my students a rule of thumb that if you were to complete all of the want more assignments for a chapter and you gave perfect answers for every question, that would count probably as an extra credit points worth of the entire week's homework. So that gives you an idea what's the expectation in sense of that. And I think that that covers what I wanted to show from here. So the final thing or last thing that I want us to do is for us to make a start of looking at our chapter 1 content. So let's do that together. Let's discuss a little bit about chapter 1 and see where we get with that. So I'm going to share again a presentation with you. We'll use that to guide us. And at this point, you should be able to see my screen again. So let's have a look at what were the key things to take away from chapter 1. Having said that, this is not necessarily enough. If this is the only thing you study, I encourage you to use those Canvas courses, full lecture videos. But this gives you a nutshell version, and that's what I normally try to offer during these live online sessions. I normally, if this was more a busy class or if we had a lot more students attending in person today, we would do a little bit of checking in. This session would be more heavily driven by the participants. But since I'm here by myself, I'm just simply going to jump in to the chapter 1 content and we'll take it from there. So let's have a look of first concept that I want us to discuss, which is anatomical position. So when we're describing human anatomy, we always assume that the person is presenting themselves in this position. I realize that that might be a little confusing because we never see people who are in this position in real life, day-to-day life. A lot of the time when we get patients, a lot of the time, for example, in forensic work that I've done a lot, the patient is definitely not in this position. Patient might be in very awkward positions or might be even missing body parts in forensic settings. However, when we write medical notes, when we study the body, when we communicate that, we always write and communicate assuming that the patient was in this position. You might ask why. The explanation for that is that this gives us kind of a shared place to start from so that our communication is going to be easier, so that we can be accurate, we can both understand what we're talking about. Even if the reality was different, we can kind of assume that this is where our patient is at. This position. So anatomical position is the patient standing upright, feet together, face facing forward, hands on the side of the body with palms facing forward. Thumbs are pointing furthest to the side. And when we describe different things, this is what we assumed a patient to be. So it really gives us a way to have a shared understanding, shared language, be much more accurate than if we always would have to start by describing the person's position first before we actually start describing, for example, injuries. When we talk about body, we can do a division into two main parts. We can talk about the axial body that covers your head, neck, and trunk. And it's not just for the skeleton, it can be used also in other tissues. And then the appendicular parts are our limbs, upper limbs, lower limbs. Again, not just for skeleton, but in general as well. The reason why this division is sometimes helpful is that it allows us to, again, remember where we have have a shared language, remember where we have different organs. Most of the vital organs are located in the axial body, and appendicular body has less vital organs. Other thing that we end up noticing when we look at this is that the terminology appendicular can make us think, for example, appendices that we put to documents or files or so on that we want to attach. So they're kind of additional stuff. They're not the main body, they're additional. So you can think of the upper limbs and lower limbs maybe through that. There is a lot of special language of anatomy and medicine when we talk about different body parts. We don't talk really about mouth, we talk about oral cavity. We don't really talk about, the eye region, we talk about orbital region. The reason for this is that even though layman's language is pretty good, a lot of the time these more anatomical or more medical terms are also more precise. A lot of the time, these are also terms that are more consistently used across the world. So we can be much more precise, much more consistent in how we communicate when we use the real language of medicine and anatomy. So for the regional terms, this might seem like a lot to learn initially, but as we go through, you will see that a lot of these terms come from either the bones on that area or muscles on that area. So really putting in the effort to learn those is going to be useful as we then continue the studies, learn the basics well, and that's going to make your life easier then later on. So I provided you a handout that's similar to this, a great resource for you to go to in terms of finding the key regions of the body and correct terms in medical and anatomical setting to talk about that. The handout is not exactly the same. It's a very similar handout, though. The second thing that I wanted to talk about our chapter relates to the planes of the body. When we study human body, we often have to look inside, and when we do that, we might either do medical imaging that shows a slice through the body, or we might in dissection setting really cut into the body. And typically we have 3 axes that we use to do those cuts. You might have sagittal or median cut, which always goes through your body. It doesn't have to be bang on in the middle, but it goes through your body in a way that you're left with right and left side, either of the entire body or an organ. If you do have mid-sagittal plane, that's always right in the middle, again separating us into right and left side. Coronal plane, or also known as a frontal plane, divides us in a plane that generates front and back, so anterior and posterior side of our body. The word coronal sometimes confuses my students, so what I tell them is think of if someone were to put on a crown, where your hands will be is where that plane will cut down. And finally, we have transverse or horizontal plane, which cuts us in this direction, giving now us rather top and bottom part of the body, so superior and inferior part of the body. And again, this plane can move, but it always creates those 2 slices or two parts. And whether it is as a whole body or whether it's as an organ, that both apply. I also wanted to talk a little bit about directional terms. So rather than using layman's language, we're again going to use proper anatomical language. So things that are high up, upper parts of the body, are going to be superior portions. Things that are further down, lower parts of the body, are going to be our inferior parts of the body. So these 2 terms are used when we talk about structures in relation to each other. We could, for example, say that your shoulder is superior to your hip, whereas your hip is inferior to your shoulder. And again, if you think of the words and kind of make meaning for those that might be helpful, superior is someone who's your supervisor in an organization is higher up than you are. If someone is feeling inferior to another person, they feel like less than. So maybe those will help you to decode those terms. Rather than saying that something is in front of the body or behind the body, the terms that we use in medicine and anatomy are anterior for the in front and posterior for the back. So let's use those words again. An example when we talk about relationship of structures would be your nose is more anterior than your ear. Your ear is more posterior than your nose. So hopefully that makes sense. We can also talk about structures being medial or lateral. Medial structures are close to the midline of the body, whereas lateral ones are far away from the midline of the body. So we could use, for example, your belly button as an example of a very medial structure, and your shoulder as an example of more lateral. So your belly button is more medial than your shoulder. Your shoulder is more lateral than your belly button. We can also talk, especially in appendicular anatomy, things being proximal or distal. Proximal means that it's close to the origin or start of that part, and distal means that it's far away from the origin. So if we talk about upper limb, we can say that our shoulder is more proximal than our palm. Our palm is more distal than our shoulder. This doesn't just apply to appendicular body parts. We could use this also, for example, when we discuss blood vessels. So are we talking about the part of the blood vessel that's close to its origin, or are we talking about blood of the blood vessel that's far away from its origin? This might be especially relevant when we look at where the blockage on a blood vessel might be. If it's very proximal, then it's going to have more severe consequences because all of the blood flow downstream is impacted. If we have a blockage at the distal blood vessel, the consequences are probably not going to be as severe because the proximal portions still work. We can also talk about terms that relate more to the fact that not all animals stand on 2 feet like humans. Sometimes we have animals, for example, on 4 feet. The term cranial refers close to the head, or close to the cranium, the skull, part of the skull. So in humans, cranial and superior would be the same thing. However, if you have an animal that stands on 4 limbs, like a dog, their cranial portion is actually going to be their anterior portion. Caudal refers towards the tail. So in human, again, inferior portions. But in a dog that's on 4 legs, the caudal portion would be their posterior portion. We can also talk about terms prone and supine. Supine means when you are laying and your face is facing upwards, forward. So your body is facing upwards when you're laying flat. Prone means when your face and the rest of the body is facing downwards when you're laying flat. But it doesn't have to be, again, the entire body. It could be just certain parts of the body, like our palms. Now my palms are in a supine position, whereas now they're going to be in a prone position. How I often think of this and tell to my students, think of palms, especially when you're carrying a bowl of soup, your hands are in a supine position. If it's the opposite, it's going to be prone position. We can also talk about structures as being deep or being superficial. Deep structures are far into the human body, whereas superficial parts are close to the surface. So I think that that's helpful for us. And one more thing that I want to spend a little bit of time to talking about is that our body is divided into cavities. These cavities help us to form spaces within the body. So we can do 2 large main divisions. You have your dorsal body cavities at the posterior side, and you have your ventral body cavities at your anterior side. Dorsal body cavities contain your cranial cavity, which houses the brain inside the cranium, the part of the skull, and your vertebral cavity, which houses the spinal cord inside the vertebral column. So that those together form your dorsal cavity. Your ventral cavities are made instead of the thoracic cavity, which houses lungs, heart, for example. Your abdominal cavity, which houses your intestines. And these 2 are separated by diaphragm, that thin sheet of muscle that separates these 2 spaces. And finally, you have a pelvic space. Pelvic space is not anatomically separated from abdominal cavity. It's just a space. And within this space, you will see things like urinary bladder, internal reproductive organs, and so on. You can see that the thoracic cavity can be further subdivided, and I'll let you learn more about that independently. finally, if we're just looking at the abdominal area, we can divide abdominal area further, and often this is useful when we're describing where the symptoms of the patient are taking place. So we can have right upper quadrant, where we typically see things like there's where your liver would be, your gallbladder. Left upper quadrant, where we see things like your stomach, your spleen. Right lower quadrant, that's where we see first part of the large intestines like cecum or appendix. And then the left lower quadrant, where we see the last parts of the digestive tract, last parts of the large intestines. In addition to these quadrants, we can also do a division into 9 regions. And again, I'll let you learn more about those independently, but they're a useful way to kind of describe very precisely patients' signs and symptoms. So that comes to the end of everything I was going to show today. In my previous recording from Friday, I actually also discussed a little bit and I showed a little bit how the assignments work. So you can refer to that. Just for the interest of time, we don't have time to do it right now. And make sure you get your weekly homework assignments submitted. Next week, we will move on to other topics to discuss. I hope you have a very good week. Remember, I'm here to help. That's a big part of what I enjoy in my job. So please, please, please make sure to let me know if I can be of an assistance. I very much want to make sure that I'm here to facilitate your learning and you're able to get all the support that you potentially need. We're going to wrap it up here for today. I hope you have a good week. Remember, I'm only a message away. Until next time, thank you and bye.